Thank you very much, everyone that's joining us in person today. I know a lot of you have been down at the demonstrations in front of the Royal Courts of Justice today, so thank you very much for making it out this evening as well to this meeting to discuss the case of Julian Assange, the persecution of Julian Assange, and thank you for all those joining us online. Tonight will be a useful meeting, a useful discussion for two reasons. One, to understand really what's happening to Julian Assange, why he's being tried, and two, to understand it in a wider context as well, what this means and what we can do about it. So to introduce the case, if people are unfamiliar about it, I'm sure everyone here is intimately familiar about it, but as is the case with so many egregious miscarriages of justice, so many of the evils in the world, when you investigate them, when you look into them, you find that they're so much worse than you can imagine. And the Assange case is, sometimes people say you couldn't make this stuff up, you couldn't write this stuff, which is normally a cop-out. You could absolutely make things up or write stuff. But the Assange case is one of those rare cases where no one would write this. It's insane what has happened to Julian Assange. And if this kind of miscarriage of justice had happened to anyone else, we would all be thinking and saying the same things, that this is unfair, this is wrong, and we have to put a stop to it. But our media has played a huge role in either ignoring, or when it's not ignoring the case, they're bringing smears, slanders, and obfuscating the case so that people are unable to draw an accurate conclusion about what is really happening here. So to give a brief overview, Julian Assange is the founder and was the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, founded in 2006. WikiLeaks began with a simple mission to publish data, essentially, information straight from the source, no spin, no bias. And in doing this, they found that they were having, they received contributions from people in the US military, people in the US Secret Services, NSA, CIA, people that have become disgusted with what they had uncovered in their jobs, what they found themselves being asked to do, namely spy on their own citizens, spy on the citizens of allied countries, targeting what seemed to be innocent people, the wholesale spying and slaughter of the US industrial war machine, essentially. WikiLeaks started publishing this information they received from people. They published leaks they received from Chelsea Manning, famously, I think one of the most famous instances in the WikiLeaks history is that video of the two Reuters journalists being gunned down by a US helicopter in Iraq. And through the contribution of more people to WikiLeaks, we found that that wasn't unusual. There's a recent case of Daniel Hale, who revealed that 90% of drone strikes hit innocent bystanders, not even the intended targets. Whether or not the targets were innocent or not, but 90% of them hit people they didn't even intend to hit. Weddings, just normal community meetings, people at home. 90% of these US drone strikes are killing innocent people. Not to go into any of the legality or morality of the US conducting these airstrikes almost everywhere in the world, really. And, this is something else that WikiLeaks and its contributors have exposed, just the extent of which the US is operating across the globe. Sweden was used essentially to attempt to extricate Assange from the UK. So Sweden was encouraged, and we've seen the recent documents to say that they were very heavily encouraged by the UK to pursue what we now know to be spurious cases, allegations of sexual assault against Assange. This was not motivated by any particular desire for justice, any feminist cause. This was weaponized in order to extradite Assange to Sweden, where he could then be taken to the US. These cases were eventually dropped, and some of the witnesses repealed these statements. But while this was ongoing, Assange took refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy. He was granted refuge there, as the Correa administration of Ecuador was a progressive administration. But unfortunately, partway through his stay there, the government of Ecuador suffered a change, and it was no longer led by a progressive government. It was led by a reactionary government who were all too happy to capitulate to the US pressure to punish Assange. And so he was taken from the Ecuadorian embassy. The police were invited in, and he spent the last 2 years in Belmarsh, largely in solitary confinement, in conditions that UN bodies and special rapporteurs have described as torture. And this is the case up till today. So we find ourselves outside the Royal Courts of Justice today, and the hearing continues tomorrow. The US is pursuing an appeal because they lost the initial case to extradite Assange. So they, after dropping the Sweden case, the US brought a case to the UK directly to try and extradite him. And this is ongoing. They lost the first case because they could not prove to the district judge that he would be safe in America, that he would not be tortured, that he would not be placed in dangerous conditions. And the US prosecutors are trying to argue today that Assange will be safe in the US. He will be secure there. He won't come to any harm. This is the same country, it was recently revealed, that colluded with the British government in an attempt to either kidnap or execute him on British soil. And the British Secret Services, the British government, were largely concerned with, well, we don't want you to pull the trigger, we'll do it. So that's where Assange is at the moment, between two hostile powers, and we'll be waiting, whatever the outcome of this case, we'll be waiting a couple of weeks to hear the judge's verdict, and then it can still be appealed again. So this is a case that will still be ongoing, and that's why it's worth our attention. It's worth us to know the details of what's going on, know how they've used their client media, how they've used the legal system to persecute this person, and what can we do to stop it. But before we go into that in a bit more detail, we are very, very lucky to be joined today by Sara Vivacqua. She's a British solicitor. She's a member of the Lawyers for Assange team, a group of legal experts who are exposing the holds in the cases brought against Assange, exposing this case for what it really is. And there's someone's brought a sign today that they've had on the demonstration that says, "Stop this political trial." And it absolutely is a political trial, not a criminal trial. So I'd like to hand over to Sara Vivacqua now. She also is a correspondent for Diario do Centro do Mundo, which I've butchered the pronunciation of. I apologise. But I'd like to hand over to Sara now, and she'll be able to give us a better exposition of the cases brought against Assange and how the legal system has been used to persecute him. Thank you.
So I don't know if everyone can see me or hear me. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear or see me.
Yeah, you're all good, Sarah. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone, for having me here. Just a quick correction, I'm not a British solicitor, I'm a foreign qualified solicitor and one of the founding members of Lawyers for Assange and Politicians for Assange. I might be an example of an ordinary person who could manage to raise the attention of the case of Assange, which I think everyone can. I decided to write down a bit of what I wanted to say today, because the Assange case the details are so important, and it's from time to time so surreal and full of post-truth and lawfare that is difficult to convey. But once people get to know the facts, we understand that Assange is the political prison of our lifetimes, and the consequences of his extraditions goes far beyond his person. It goes to the extrajudicial ability of the US to prosecute people all around the world. It goes to the question, who has the discretion to tell which documents are confidential or not, which is something we need to discuss in our society. What is confidential or not? Are war crimes confidential? Should they be under state seal? Is the USA editor of the world saying what press freedom means for the totality of the planet? So it raises so many legal fundamental questions of where humanity should be going. So I decided just to write. I hope you don't mind, and I hope it's not going to be boring. So I'll begin by saying, imagine a situation with no prospects, that you are unable to escape from it. Imagine being held 23.5 hours a day, confined in a concrete cell with 10 centimeters wide window, with no possibility of socialized, condemned to inactivity. Surveillance cameras will turn every 30 minutes. You are 100% detained externally in the hands of a prison ward, Rob Davis, who was removed from one of his last positions over 17 suspicion inmate death during his tenure. Chelmsford, Woodhill, and now Belmarsh, where a new suspected death of a disabled prisoner in 2019 took place. Imagine having to expect the worst, death itself, slowly and tortuously, 175 years in jail under oppressive special measures in the hand of American authorities, in a case that will be tried secretly in the infamous espionage court, which in its whole history has never acquitted a single person. Imagine having your extradition case overseen by a judge who received financial benefits from organizations with close tie to UK Foreign Office. Imagine the judge had her husband and son exposed by WikiLeaks. The latter is the vice president today and cybersecurity consultant, is specialized in preventing data leakage, a company founded by the British Secret Service. Imagine 4 powerful countries using all arbitrary resources and means to destroy a single man. Nothing is off limits. These are the words of senior US officials in the recent revealed plot to kidnap Assange and assassinate him extrajudicially. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Melzer, and his medical team and his predecessors conclude this is psychological torture. Their opinions were ignored by British authorities, and it's good to remember that the right to live free of torture is an international and national recognized right, and it's an absolute one. This means that there's no possibility of legal justification for torturing anyone. The treatment Julian Assange is not coincidentally, it's a mirror image of all oppression and injustice that he had revealed through WikiLeaks. His prosecution is an account of torture as a state policy, the weaponization of state powers and judicial system for private vendetta, extraordinary rendition, corruption, extrajudicial killing, unlawful mass surveillance, coup attempts. And most and foremost, it showed the total depravity and perversity of the capitalist ruling elites and how far they would go against an enemy, whoever that is. As the American euphorically once said, yes, we can. Julian Assange, founder and publisher of, I'm going to go with the facts a little bit now. Julian Assange is a founder and publisher of the WikiLeaks. He's been for the past 2.5 years preventively detained in Belmarsh high security prison among terrorists without a single charge. Prior to that, he spent 7 years in the Equatorial Embassy, where he had political asylum, and 1 year under house arrest. He faced extradition to the United States and criminal prosecution under the Espionage Act, a law already considered unconstitutional by experts, enacted in 1917 to prosecute anti-war dissidents, a political law. He will be tried in the infamous espionage court in Virginia and risks up to 75 years imprisoned in the death threat maximum security prison ADX Florence in solitary confinement and under special administrative measures, whatever that means. Assange is prosecuted by a foreign court for making public classified documents exposing the so-called war on terror. The evidence has never been disputed. It's true and of public interest. The leak of US military documents from Afghanistan and Iraq, a trove of the US Department cables, the war diaries, they provided evidence that the US government misled the public about activities in Afghanistan and Iraq and committed war crimes. Julian Assange exposed the war on terror, which was inaugurated by 9/11. 6 wars later, with millions killed, trillions wasted, the war on terror served to no other purpose than to generate and accumulate wealth in the hands of a few with the price of a mass destruction and civil rights suppression. We lied, we killed, we cheated. These were the shameless public words of former CIA Director Mike Pompeo. If the US government can press espionage charges against a foreign that publish classified documents provided by whistleblowers, it will set a precedent for governments to prosecute journalists anywhere who reveal state crimes. State confidentiality is not an absolute seal, and it's not its legal purpose to conceal state crimes if torture, genocide, illegal state policies are being concealed under the cloak of state confidentiality. We have the right to know. The state has the duty to disclose. And one question, who is deciding what is confidential or not? We, the people? In January, District Judge Vanessa Baraitza blocked this tradition, ruling that an extradition of Assange would be oppressive due to his mental health and substantial suicide risk. Today, we saw the CPS, on behalf of the USA, alleging that the judge erred in her assessment of Assange's mental health by giving too much weight to the evidence of the defense psychiatric expert, Professor Koppelman, and that such extradition would not be oppressive. Diplomatic assurances were made to ensure Assange will be safe, and segregation as isolation is a relative term because prisoners can still communicate through windows and doors and shout. That was the CPS argument. But what's more, James Lewis for the CPS went as far as to say that Koppelman willingly misled the court by playing the system to get justice, which he perceives is correct. Those were his exact words. Koppelman willingly misled the court by playing the system to get the justice which he perceived is correct, by omitting in a preliminary report that Assange was in a relationship with Stella Morris and had 2 children. This fact was known by the judge from the outset. He shed doubt on the diagnosis of Assange being within the autistic spectrum and characterized as misleading Assange's risk of suicide and that his precondition could ever impact their access, that risk assessment. The prosecutor, although not a psychiatric expert himself, dismissed the expert report by substituting it with his own conclusion and personal psychiatric assessment of Assange's actions. He listed a series of random behaviors and concluded that Assange's state of mind was not compatible with a suicidal person. In Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's last film, the main character finds himself in the middle of an unsettling experience. He enters uninvited a mansion where a powerful secret society performs a cult orgy, where all in attendance are wearing impenetrable masks, cloaks, and sex slaves obey the strict commands of the hierarchy, where dissent can cost their lives. Once spotted as an intruder, the ritual immediately stops and the spotlight falls on the main character. He's shamed, blamed, and put in his place for having to take his mask off and close with the indication of a gate ramp to follow. This powerful imagery suggests nevertheless a ruling class that is operating in the shadows of society, subjugate individuals that will do whatever it takes to maintain this hierarchy, that legitimate and keep hidden their depravities. What makes this man truly powerful is that they get to be invisible. They perverse deeds to be inexistent to the external world. They can do whatever they want with impunity, if not with awards. The ordinary intruder is not important enough to be invisible. He must take off his mask for all to see him, but at the same time, he cannot see or name those who rule him. Confused and unable to distinguish between reality and fantasy, the rational and irrational, he's left to obey the rules he is unaware of and don't totally comprehend. And this power structure relies on his docile obedience and of those constrained or voluntarily play along to keep the deep, dark bottom line of this underworld. Julian Assange told us the uncensored story of our times. He ripped the masks off those operating under the fantasy name Deep State and give them full identity, addresses, national insurance number, company number, secret conversation, videos of their crimes, their perverse intents and unsatiable greed. Julian even went further. He sought to give dignity to those that anonymously died in war crimes. They were anonymously detained in Guantanamo. They were tortured in silence. They had their lives destroyed. He decrypted for posterity the understanding that September 11 did no other than inaugurate the possibility of unprecedented mass surveillance and suppression of fundamental rights in name of the war of terror. It wiped out civil lives in Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Yemen, and deprived of the future many generations to come. Yes, we can. So my question is, will the Magna Carta stand the tests of our time? I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't know if you could hear, but there was a huge round of applause from the room. And I think everyone watching at home as well will be deeply appreciative of that very informative but moving tribute as well to what Julian Assange has done, not just for us, but for humanity. And this really is a different era that we're entering, this age of information where they can no longer adequately hide, as they used to be able to, what they're really up to. Assange is, of course, not alone. He's joined by people like Chelsea Manning, who served many years in a maximum security prison, often in solitary confinement. Edward Snowden, who, as we know, fled to Russia, understandably, to escape the consequences of leaking the the massive extent to which the NSA was spying on American citizens, but also their allies. Daniel Hale, who revealed that 90% of drone strikes hit bystanders, not the intended targets. And Craig Murray here in Britain, who's currently in prison for technically reporting on the Alex Salmond case, but also, I think, because he reported on the Assange case brilliantly. He was there in the dock, he was there in the courtroom every day, explaining and exposing what a farce this trial was. And that's dangerous for our ruling class. And so they wanted to punish him and shut him up. And the trial against him was equally spurious in the Alex Salmond case. The idea of jigsaw identification, where if you took what he had published along with what others had published, you might be able to find out who some of the anonymous accusers were. But none of the other people who had published the other parts of the jigsaw identification received any kind of punishment or any kind of trouble. And some of them had published after Craig had published his piece, I believe. So what links all these people, apart from obviously a lot of them working directly together, being involved in each other's work and cases, but the one thing that links them to their real crimes are exposing the imperialism of the United Kingdom and the United States. They've exposed who benefits from the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, how these wars are persecuted, how the media is complicit, how people are shut up and bribed, and how everyone is surveilled and oppressed. And these people didn't just write articles, hand-written articles saying, isn't it terrible that wars happen? Isn't it terrible that sanctions kill 100,000 children? Madeleine Albright thinks it's worth it. Isn't it terrible that Hillary Clinton cackles as they destroy Libya, which has led to the reintroduction of chattel slavery in that country, destroying one of the most advanced nations on the continent of Africa and plunging it into chaos? They didn't just write articles saying, isn't this terrible? If only there was something we could do. These people did something. They exposed some fundamental truths, some real information about what's going on, and that's why they're being punished. Not because they're journalists or reporters, but because they took some action and told the truth in a world that wants these things to remain in the shadows. The USA has bases in Britain, Germany, all over the world. It doesn't have these for the benefit of spreading human rights and democracy. It has them for protecting its material interests. There's a reason that the US troops are ready to go everywhere in the world. It's because they consider the world their backyard. And the same with Assange. He's not an American citizen. No, he's has no reason to be extradited to America, but they consider no one out of their reach. And that's how they operate with regards to countries. That's how they operate with regards to individuals. And this crackdown on information and truth is a part of the drive to war against Russia and against China. This crackdown is against the people that might expose the propaganda published in the media that says these people are evil, these people are our enemies, we have to go fight them. These people expose the real nature of these wars, which are for profit. Think about the amount of money we know, and this didn't take the bravery of Snowden or Manning or Assange. This is easily findable, identifiable information about how much money was made from Iraq. Billions went to companies linked to the US presidency of Bush alone. Halliburton, close links to Dick Cheney, got over $1 billion. And what did it cost? Just a few million Iraqi lives, just a few thousand British lives, just tens of thousands of American lives. And so, as part of our work, we have to take up what these people have started. We have to stand against the war propaganda. We have to take real action, not just sit here and say, isn't it terrible? But we have to be organized. We have to be able to protest these injustices more than just protesting, more than just saying, we should stop this. We have to bring people out into the streets and make them stop this. Because united, we can't be defeated. I was talking to someone today outside the Royal Courts of Justice. I thought it was fantastic that so many people were out there to be able to say, this is injustice, this needs to stop. But what if the workers were on board? What if the unions were on board? What if they brought the trains to a stop, the buses to a stop? And when people ask why, say, because our ruling class is fooling us. Because they're saying these people are enemies. They're saying Assange is our enemy when he's not. He's telling us the truth. They're telling us foreigners are the enemy and we have to go fight them. And that's not the truth. The reality is our enemies are sitting in the halls of power in Britain, in America. They're sitting behind the big companies and reaping in mega profits up during the pandemic. Everyone's gotten richer that already started rich. Every billionaire's got a few more billion since the pandemic started. Now, how many workers are unemployed or underemployed? And they're raising the minimum wage, the living wage now to £9.50 an hour, which is too little, too late. So it's not in our interest to support this war machine. It's not in our interest to support this war propaganda. And that's why we need to build a real working class movement in the Workers' Party of Britain, which I believe can be the home of that. Not the Labour Party, not the party of Sir Keir Starmer QC, who was Director of Public Prosecutions and head of the Crown Prosecution Service, while Britain was pressuring Sweden to bring about these charges against Snowden to extradite him. So these same businessmen that are profiting from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere in the world are the same ones that are telling you that Assange is evil and must be locked up for the rest of his life. And so we have to fight against these attempts to silence them. It's just one of the many things we have to do. But we have to fight against these injustices. And it reminds me of a quote from Martin Niemöller, who is an interesting figure. I'm sure everyone will have heard this bit of poetry, this quote. But in looking it up, I found out that he was actually a Nazi sympathizer to start with. He was actually organizing Lutheran pastors to support the Nazi party. But as soon as he started seeing what was really going on, what the Nazi party were really about, he ended up turning against them and spent many, many years in concentration camps throughout the war because he was opposed to the Nazis. So it's interesting how someone can start from that perspective, learn the truth, make a complete 180 to fight against the very system that they initially started out supporting. But his poem was, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up for me. So that's why we need to stand up for Assange and all these other heroic people that are telling the truth and are being persecuted for it. Because if we don't stand up for them, the next target is us.